All right, let's talk about something every parent sees: social fear. It's this whole journey that every single kid goes on, but it can look totally different for each one.
So, you're at the park or a birthday party, and you see it, that moment of hesitation. Maybe your kid is clinging to your leg or just quietly refusing to jump in and play. And you think, is this just shyness, or is it something more? It's a question pretty much every parent asks.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Shyness, super common, but get this. The National Institute of Mental Health estimates that a whopping 1 in 4 adolescents will actually experience an anxiety disorder. I mean, that's a huge number, right? So, let's dive in and trace this journey from the very beginning to see how we get to that point.
Okay, so our journey starts right at the beginning, in infancy. This is where we see the very first glimmers of a child figuring out their social world.
Around 6 to 8 months old, you get this thing called stranger anxiety. And I love this phrase for it. It's not a bug, it's a feature. It's a totally normal, healthy milestone. It just means your baby's brain is smart enough now to tell the difference between you, their safe person, and everybody else. It's basically a built-in survival tool.
Okay, but for some infants, maybe about 15 to 20%, that hesitation is, well, a little more intense. Scientists call this a temperamental trait, behavioral inhibition. Now, it's really important to know this isn't a disorder. It's just a predisposition. But it is an early sign that we want to keep an eye on because it can be a predictor for social anxiety down the road.
And you can really see how these fears grow and change over time on this chart. It's fascinating, right? We go from that simple, I don't know you, fear of strangers, to separation anxiety. Then, as their world gets bigger, school and performance anxiety can pop up. And it all kind of builds up to the teen years, where it becomes this much more complex, abstract fear of what other kids think, that fear of peer rejection.
So think about this transition. Home is the safe zone, right? It's a controlled environment. But the playground, the classroom, that's like the Wild West. Suddenly, in middle childhood, kids are being judged by their peers on literally everything: how they play, what they say, how they do in class. It becomes this social crucible.
All right, now let's jump ahead to adolescence, because this is where all these factors can combine into what researchers call a perfect storm for social anxiety.
So those years between 10 and 13, they're a really sensitive period. Research pinpoints early adolescence as the main window when social anxiety disorder, what they used to call social phobia, really tends to show up. And it's not random. It's this massive convergence of all these powerful developmental forces hitting at once.
Yeah, it's not happening in a vacuum at all. You've got this trifecta of things going on. First, you've got the biological stuff: puberty, hormones, massive changes in the brain. Then, cognitively, they suddenly have this new ability to think about themselves, to compare themselves to others, constantly. And finally, socially, their entire world starts to revolve around their peers and what those peers think of them.
And right at the center of this perfect storm is a concept called fear of negative evaluation, or FNE. This is the engine driving so much of adolescent social anxiety. It's that intense, sometimes totally paralyzing fear of being judged, of what other people are thinking about you.
Okay, so this brings us to the big question for parents, right? How do we know when normal, developmental fears have tipped over into something more, into an actual clinical disorder? Where's that line?
This slide is so important. The key difference isn't about whether there's fear, it's about the size of the fear and the impact it has. So, being nervous before a class presentation? Totally normal. But when that worry is so excessive and out of proportion to the actual situation, that's a red flag. Caring what your friends think? Normal. Avoiding parties, school, and your entire social life because of it? That's a red flag. The two big words to remember are avoidance and impairment.
And these symptoms can show up in really physical ways. We're talking heart palpitations, feeling sick to their stomach, tense muscles. And behaviorally, it's going to look different depending on their age. For little kids, it might look like crying, tantrums, or that classic clinging. For teens, it's all about that avoidance we talked about. Ducking out of social events, maybe even refusing to go to school, or spending an insane amount of time getting ready for one little social thing.
But here's the really, really good news. Even when it does cross that line into a disorder, social anxiety is absolutely treatable. So let's talk about what actually works, according to the research. One of the gold standard evidence-based treatments out there is a program called Social Effectiveness Therapy for Children. You'll see it called SETC.
What's great about SETC is that it's a super practical, hands-on program. It's not just about talking about fears, it's about doing. First, they actually teach kids social skills, like literally how to make eye contact or start a conversation. Then, and this is key, they get to practice those skills in a group with other kids who aren't anxious. And finally, they do what's called in vivo exposure, which just means helping them face their fears one small step at a time out in the real world.
And does it work? Oh yeah, the results are incredible. In clinical trials, 67%, that's 2/3, of the kids who went through the SET-C program no longer qualified for a social phobia diagnosis afterward. I mean, think about that. That's 2/3 of kids getting their childhoods back.
So what can you as a parent actually do? Well, you play such a crucial role. You don't have to be a therapist, but you can use these evidence-based strategies. Simple things, like respecting their need for a warm-up period in new situations, or preparing them in advance for a party or a play date. A huge one is just modeling confident social behavior yourself. And you can help them by arranging small, manageable social experiences. And always, always keep that key question in mind. Is this just their temperament, or is it actually impairing their ability to function and be happy?
So when we understand this whole arc of social fear, from that first little flicker of stranger anxiety all the way to the complicated social world of a teenager, it just gives us better tools, doesn't it? It helps us be more empathetic, more effective guides for our kids. It's all about helping them build a world where connecting with others is a source of joy, not a source of fear. Thanks so much for watching.